It was Tinubu's global wake-up call as Nigeria pushed world leaders for sweeping reforms at the United Nations General Assembly. Shettima was standing in for the president. The former governor of Oyo State, Rashidi Ladoja, has been installed as the 44th Olubadan of Ibadan. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimale here in Abuja. Let me take you straight to see some of the beauty of royalty, as now we see a recast of power in royal mantle. A former governor of Oyo State, Senator Rashidi Ladoja, has now been installed as the 44th Olubadan of Ibadan. He was installed and his staff of office presented to him by the governor, Shettima. It happened earlier this afternoon with the presence of the world, President Bola Tinubu, and some very senior political officials were present at the event.
Hi, Engineer Shettima, the governor of Oyo State of Nigeria, in exercise of the powers conferred upon me by subsections 1 and 2 of Section 20 of the Chief's Law, Cap 28, Volume 1, Laws of Oyo State of Nigeria 2000, and by virtue of all other powers enabling in that behalf, I hereby present the staff of office to Oba, His Imperial Majesty, Senator, Governor, Engineer, my Baba, Ogo.
That happened today when the new Olubadan received the instrument of authority in the presence of President Bola Tinubu, some governors, former governors, traditional and religious leaders, right at the Mapo Hall in Ibadan. That now gets us ready to check out some of your political roundup stories.
Justice James Omotosho of the Federal High Court of Abuja has rejected the no-case submission made by the detained self-acclaimed leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, in his ongoing alleged terrorism trial. In a ruling earlier today, Justice Omotosho held that the prosecution has established a case against Kanu to warrant that he be ordered to enter his defense. The judge who dismissed Kanu's no-case submission found that the evidence led by the prosecution and the exhibits it tendered have raised serious allegations for Kanu's involvement in terrorism activities to warrant that he be given the opportunity to defend himself. The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Mr. Nyesom Wike, has renewed his commitment to President Bola Tinubu's directive to revamp the infrastructure of the nation's capital. At the flag-off of the construction of the arterial road in Kasada district linking the renewed estate, Mr. Wike asked the contractor to ensure that the roads are delivered to standard and on time. As part of efforts to ensure a safer Nigeria, the Inspector General of Police, Kaude Egbetukun, says the force is undergoing deliberate restructuring to strengthen operations, enhance intelligence gathering, improve training, and enforce accountability at every level. Speaking in Abuja while commissioning 59 armored vehicles for special operations, Mr. Egbetukun assures Nigerians that the force remains committed to improving its response time in order to secure the nation. Mr. Egbetukun asks that citizens of Nigeria will see the armored vehicles on the nation's roads, towns, and in vulnerable communities, which translates directly into greater visibility, quicker response times, and improved safety outcomes.
The Nigerian police force is judged by how safe our people feel, how quickly we respond, and how calmly we stand against lawlessness. These 59 armored Toyota Hilux vehicles commissioned today in Abuja are evidence that this force does not trade in promises, it delivers capacity.
In the FCT, ahead of the 2027 general elections, the North Central Renaissance Movement is asking political parties to zone their presidential ticket to the North Central. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the national coordinator of the movement, Professor Ngabu Ketiso, says all the political parties need to zone their presidential ticket to the North Central in the interest of equity and justice. He explains that the North Central Zone have always supported the other zones to produce the president, so the North Central Zone deserves their support to produce the next president by 2027. Lastly, some lawyers under the aegis of the Lawyers Network for Good Governance want the former President Goodluck Jonathan to contest for president in the 2027 presidential election. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the coordinator of the group, Mr. Justice Osuji, says the former president remained the surest path to rescue Nigeria from hardship, insecurity, and division under the current administration. He argued that Jonathan's return was not just desirable, but necessary, citing global examples of political comebacks, including Donald Trump in the United States and John Mahama in Ghana.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us on the program. Tonight, we're going to be analyzing the Bola Tinubu's administration's global politics understanding and capacity and how to swim in the global political waters. It does look like an UNGA-shy President Bola Tinubu has sent a very strong message to the globe, on the global stage, to the world. The president, perhaps for the second time, being represented by his vice president, Shettima, has used its platform at the United Nations General Assembly to renew calls for urgent reform of the global body. With President Bola Tinubu absent, Vice President Shettima delivered the country's address urging world leaders to grant Africa a permanent representation on the Security Council. The message was clear from the nation. The United Nations must adapt to today's realities or risk slipping into irrelevance. Nigeria also pressed for debt relief, digital inclusion, and a stronger multilateral order. Well, Nigeria did not lose its voice in asking for a Palestinian state, part of the demands that have been made. Most significant of all the asking is that Nigeria has to be in the room when the United Nations Security Council is meeting, a permanent seat at the table. That's one of the asking of the President Bola Tinubu administration. It's not a new one, but this seems to be more, in fact, more vehement. A fiery speech from the Vice President Shettima, who stood tall at the global stage representing his principle. But let me allow you to listen to a portion of a speech, this one in reference to respect of the demand for a seat at the United Nations Security Council. Take a listen to Vice President Shettima.
To strengthen the prospects for peace, development, and human rights, Madam President, I want to make 4 points today to outline how we can do this. 1. Nigeria must have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. This should take place. This should take place as part of a wider process of institutional reform. 2, we need urgent action to promote sovereign debt relief and access to trade and financing. 3, countries that host minerals must benefit from those minerals. And 4th, the digital divide must close. As our friend the Secretary General has said, AI must stand for Africa included. On my first point, the United Nations will recover its relevance only when it reflects the world as it is, not as it was. Nigeria's journey tells this story with clarity.
That is one of the strongest portions of Vice President Kashim Shettima's speech representing President Bola Tinubu. Another part is when he was talking about security situation and how to tackle violent extremism. Take a listen to him.
None of us in this world can function peacefully in isolation. This is the heavy burden of sovereignty. Sovereignty is a covenant of shared responsibility, a recognition that our survival is bound to the survival of others. To live up to this charge, we must work hand in hand with our neighbors and partners. We must follow the trails of weapons, of money, and of people. For these forces, too often driven by pestilence non-state actors, ignite the fires of conflict across our region. Madam President, Nigeria's soldiers and civilians carry a proud legacy. They have participated in 51 out of 60 United Nations peacekeeping operations since our independence in 1960. We have stood with our partners in Africa to resolve conflicts, and we continue that commitment today through the Multinational Joint Task Force.
That is another portion of the Vice President's speech. But let me take you to the portion where he was making a very, and this time around, playing in the global political waters. A lot of people have been wondering, where does Nigeria stand when it comes to the war in Gaza, Israel, and the Middle East and its politics? Take a listen to Nigeria's position as presented by the federal government and through the mouth of Vice President Kashim Shettima.
We do not believe that the sanctity of human life should be trapped in the corridors of endless debate. That is why we say, without stuttering and without doubt, that a two-state solution remains the most dignified path to lasting peace for the people of Palestine. For too long, this community has borne the weight of moral conflict. For too long, we have been caught in the crossfire of violence that offends the conscience of humanity. We come not as partisans, but as peacemakers. We come as brothers and sisters of a shared world, a world that must never reduce the right to live into the currency of devious politics. The people of Palestine are not collateral damage in a civilization searching for order. They are human beings, equal in worth, entitled to the same freedoms and dignities that the rest of us take for granted.
That's just about what we need to get this conversation started. I have one person with a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and perhaps insights into all of what is playing. Well, Nigeria cannot stand aloof in global politics. Whatever happens with the rest of the world affects Nigeria. Now, it's in several heads of state, the Ghanaian president, the Kenyan president. We've seen the Prime Minister of Israel. All of them have addressed, including the American president, have addressed the General Assembly. Where does Nigeria stand in all of these politics? Because whatever happens in this rest of the world affects us on a local stage. Our local politics is not in isolation in the global politics. So we'll be getting insight from a former External Affairs Minister and a professor of political science, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. He will be joining me on the program, but that's after we return from this break, everyone. Join us again. Thanks everyone for staying with us. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, eminent academic and a political science professor and an former External Affairs Minister. It's live for us on the program to give us some insight into the global politics, the speech, the delivery of Nigeria, and those demands that are being made. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us tonight on the program.
Good evening.
Thank you so much indeed. Let me ask, I'd like to get your view, Prof. This is the second time that President Bola Tinubu is absent at the United Nations General Assembly meeting. And the second time also that Vice President Kashim Shettima will be representing him on that same podium. What is your view on that?
No, it will be a miracle if one can read into the operation or the motivation of the mind. The Vice President has been a great articulator. I don't think that we need to worry about him being on the platform rather than President Tinubu himself showing up. I have had over the years the interaction with the Vice President, and I've always been quite impressed by the way in which he articulates policies, and the delivery is something that has always impressed me. Yes, I know the point you are making, but if you look at the roster of speakers, you will notice that there are others who, there are presidents who are represented by their vice presidents, and there are presidents who are represented by even their foreign ministers. So I don't think we need to make much ado about the absence of President Tinubu on that podium.
But in the true sense of it, this is a global stage where a lot of people think that perhaps the biggest of the meeting or coming together of global or world leaders. And imagine that maybe the first incident or the first time around when VP Shettima represented President Bola Tinubu, maybe the second time the president will be there. Are you saying that it doesn't matter that even the Foreign Affairs Minister Yusuf Tuga could have stood in for President Bola Tinubu at this stage, especially because we're making some very strong demands from the global stage?
So you are trying to box me into a corner. Under normal circumstances, it is the president who should stand at that podium to talk to the world under normal circumstances. But I have no idea why the first time and the second time President Tinubu has not stepped up to that podium. I have no idea. And I suggest that perhaps you should direct this question at one of the high-level advisors on media to explain why. But I get the point you are making. It is the normal practice. But I know that even as foreign minister under President Babangida, I have occupied that podium and delivered the speeches that he should have delivered. Nothing was lost. But I accept that you've raised a genuine point.
The point I'm making, Prof, is that would the world take us seriously if we're saying we're asking for a permanent seat at the Security Council? How impressive could that be? And you see the rest of of the global leaders who are by themselves, the French president, the Prime Minister of Israel, and all of them by themselves being represented. Well, I mean, except if there are those who say President Bola Tinubu should be Nigeria first and global politics second. But if you were in the shoes of Yusuf Tuga, for example, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, asking for a permanent seat at the Security Council, how audacious do you think that is?
Oh, no. Look, there are several factors that are at play in fighting for a permanent seat, the Security Council. The Vice President made actually reference to one, and that was on our participation in the, I think it said 51 out of 60 peacekeeping operations of the United Nations. That counts more than the president standing at that podium. Number two, I mean, if I were to run the campaign, of course, I would also be making reference to the various contributions that we made in the economic field, especially on the number three, I will make reference to the technical aid cost scheme. You know, from the United States that runs the peace cost scheme, its core is the only scheme on the technical field in the global south that are now around. So in a way, it's not as if the absence of the president would diminish our capacity to campaign or diminish the kind of support that we will get. But I have considered that if I were one of his advisors, I would advise him to show up on that podium. There must be a reason, and I don't know that reason. It's only the villa that can then explain. The president of Brazil was there, president of Turkey was there, various other presidents, the Prime Minister of Iran was there. And so I concede to you that I've raised a valid point. It's just that I am not in a position to give an explanation, but I concede to you that in lateral negotiation, if the president was given the opportunity of the United Nations General Assembly podium, deliver Nigeria's view of the world and Nigeria's demand for it.
In the real sense of it, what significance do you think Nigeria's demand in the Security Council means for us locally?
Well, Nigeria representing the largest economy in Africa now, Nigeria representing, I don't know what the percentage of the black boys in the world is. It means a lot for us to be one of the African representatives, permanent representatives in the Security Council. You will recall there was an interview done by one of our colleagues with the president of South Africa. The name escapes me now, Mandela. And Mandela made the point that until Nigeria sorts itself out, the black community in the world, we didn't say in Africa, in the world, wouldn't have found a credible voice. Nelson Mandela said that, and yet he was president of South Africa. He could have said, oh, when South Africa finds his voice. He could have said, when Ethiopia finds his voice. No. He said, when Nigeria sorts itself out, then the black voice in the world would have received its recognition, its proper place. So to that extent, everything is not in terms of bread and butter. If that is where you are going. For us to occupy a permanent seat in the Security Council means a lot to the global status of Nigeria.
But, and I like to, I don't want to box you, but I like to put you on the spot. Do you see President Bola Tinubu as someone who is really interested in global politics, or someone who is just interested in the national development of the country, who bother less about global politics? Is that how his body language, does it look like his governance style or the manner in which he handles global affairs? It looks like, or how do you see him?
I mean, I could deconstruct his moves on the global scene. It's not, that body language is not a consistent one. He had traveled, when you look at where he has traveled to, and he seems to be more interested in what I will call transactional foreign policy. Foreign policy that will bring in well, what do the economists call it? Investments. He seems to be more interested in that. And so he goes to Brazil, where he can sign agreements with businessmen. He goes to Japan, where also he can get businessmen interested. And when you look at the people on these nations, he seems to concentrate more on businessmen from the Nigerian side. And so that seems to be his own preoccupation, why he leaves the political language, the political body language to his vice president. So in a way, that will be my own deconstruction of his foreign policy, his foreign, the interests shown and how far he's been prepared to go. Because you are trying to put me on this spot, Sheung, and you always do that. But there are, moves that I cannot explain as a foreign policy scholar and as a foreign policy expert. I don't understand why we don't have ambassadors in place. Even if it's a question of, segregating the posts where we need, he doesn't need to put all the 100 and something ambassadors in place at the same time. Places like the United Nations itself, Washington, London, France demand diplomatic presence at the highest post. And it's not that we don't have people. Akinwumi Adesina has just freed himself at the completion, haven't performed creditably. Now, he could be considered for one of those 5, 6, 7 posts that are vacant that I have mentioned. There are other Nigerian candidates who will do Nigeria well. I don't know why these posts are not being filled. So I think that we just have on our hand, not that I think he's not interested in foreign affairs, but it's just the way he himself is prioritizing getting in foreign investors into Nigeria. And I think he should realize that some of these posts that I have mentioned will add value to his drive for foreign investment.
Give me another moment, Prof. We need to take another commercial break, and we'll be back to continue our conversation. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with us. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, a former external affairs minister, has been speaking with us on Nigeria on the global stage, our demands, and the interplay between national interest and global politics. Thanks so much, Prof, for your time tonight. Part of what, you look at the P5 on the Permanent Security Council seat, and you look at what is happening in the world, and there's a big challenge that VP Shettima threw at the world, is that a lot of things have changed. The world is not the way it was. The United Nations now needs to reckon with what is going on. And we saw what the conflict in Russia and Ukraine has done to the world. The conflict in parts of the Middle East, we saw what has happened. We saw the presentation of Prime Minister Netanyahu. It does look like the world is in more danger of a larger conflict. The reason why United Nations started after the Second World War, it does look like the world is in even more disturbing turmoil than one can ever imagine. Is the United Nations losing its grip and its relevance?
I was surprised myself to hear comments to that extent from a few of the heads of state or presidents who are making their delivery, because actually they are the source of the inactivity of the United Nations. Look at how many Security Council meetings we have had on 1, Gaza, 2, Ukraine, and who has been vetoing decisions or the attempt to reach decisions on those 2 things is the United States. One nation. Not the United States has not been paralyzed, but one nation, and that's the United States, has used the power of the veto to prevent the United Nations reaching decisions and resolving conflict. So the United Nations is not irrelevant in what is going on. I even suspect that this has been foreseen at the time when the United Nations was being formed, because you cannot have a situation where the United States, as a superpower, then gets itself into a conflict with other superpowers on the membership of the Security Council. because that would then lead to a world war, which is the last thing that we want. And so that power, that mechanism of the veto was embedded into the United Nations Charter. It is true it frustrates the activities of the United Nations. But that's the price you pay to avoid a global war. So really, I would rather have a regional war than have a global war. And then make the justification that the United Nations has now proved that it is useful because it has led us into a global war. We must, if you get a scholarly trajectory of the achievements of the United Nations from the time it was established up until now, we will give kudos to the United Nations. One admits that there have been issues on which the United Nations have been paralyzed. But what is the United Nations if not the collectivity of its members? And it just happens that in matters of war, then the mechanism of the veto is kicked into place to prevent us from having a global war.
You look at what is going on, and perhaps the reason why DP Shettima has said, out of the 60 UN peacekeeping operations, Nigeria has participated in 51. But I'm interested in the implications on the impact on some of these meetings at the global stage. Although there are those who have criticized the huge amount of Nigeria representation or participants at the United Nations. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigeria has more persons at the United Nations meeting. It has always happened like that. But you look at it, Prof. VP Shettima read in that speech, and Nigeria is asking for urgent action on debt relief and access to trade and financing. You think that was a very good one, isn't it?
A speech on that global scene identifies your national interests. You cannot cover all the problems in the world and proffer solutions to that. There are different areas of interest to different countries. And so Shettima identified those areas that are of interest to Nigeria. Again, we can deconstruct and maybe be critical of some of the solutions that he proffered. For example, asking for debt relief. There are people who will say, how can, unless we are doing it on behalf of other African countries, or we are doing it on the behalf of other global south, how can a country that has the largest economy in Nigeria, in Africa, be asking for rescheduling of debt and sovereign debt relief, especially given the way and manner in which even we ourselves are running our own economy. So that could be an area that one could ask for more explanation. But in the other areas, whether climate change, given what is happening in our oil fields, the issue which we've discussed of membership of the Security Council, and even the issue of Gaza, he pressed the right buttons. I am aware that there are people in Nigeria who felt that Nigeria should not take a position on the two-state solution. I'm aware of that, but it has been an issue on which Nigeria has been consistent. And so I'm proud of the speech. And don't forget that, yes, the United States government, Trump, can talk for, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, or what have you. There are limitations on the time allocated to each head of state to prevent, that time when Cuba, Fidel Castro used to speak for 3 hours. Muammar Gaddafi used to speak for hours on the podium until an agreement was reached, making a limitation on the time allocation to it. So when you have a time limitation, then you restrict yourself to those areas of your national interest that you want to bring to the attention of the world.
And you look at the issue of advance, and a lot of conversation was raised around mining and exploration and how Nigeria can have some advantage in trade and commerce. But the issue of security was another one that VP raised or spoke about in his speech. He talked about the challenges of insurgency and violent extremism that we face at home. But we're not the only country in the world that is facing those kind of extremism. On that kind of stage, have we, looking back at recent history, President Muhammadu Buhari had raised this concern about how the rest of the world needs to pay attention to what is happening in northern Nigeria about extremism and violent tendencies. But have we received any kind of help? Are we being listened to? Are we getting the kind of help when we scream on the global stage about insecurity on our soil, on home soil?
Well, there are two issues you've raised. One is the way and manner by which we handle the presence and exploitation of earth materials, the mining, the control, and security. One is within our control, and we will have access to blame if, in the way and manner we get the rest of the world, the buccaneers involved in mining in Nigeria, we do not control them. And we are, all we need to do is to look at Congo DRC and other parts of Africa where multinational companies have been allowed to come and, to the detriment of the interests of countries, get on with their mining activities. We will only have access to blame, nobody else. But in terms of the second issue you've raised, yes, we must bring to the attention of the world the problem we face in terms of insurgency, because insurgency is not a domestic affair. The problem that we face, especially after the destabilization of Libya, following the death of Gaddafi, these soldiers came across the Sahel, and we now have to face their activities. And in fact, one could go back and say, their involvement of the global north in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, they didn't go north, they came south. So it's not just a Nigerian problem alone. It is a global problem. And I think we deserve support from the world community in the way and manner in which we confront these jihadists who have come into Nigeria. And we are not getting that kind of support, incidentally. We are paying for all the weapons that we need. And yet, given the interests of the global north in Nigerian economy, they also should have an interest in checkmating the activities of the jihadists, the bandits, and whatever name you could call them.
But, Prof, let's wrap up this way, and I'd like you to give us, because you know the ins and outs, you know all of the technicalities about playing politics on the global stage and how that can influence your national development. If there is one thing that this government could learn from history on how to play this politics and play it well to your own advantage, what would you say to this government tonight in learning now that they've gone on the global stage again, and what would you say could be the lesson to learn from all of this experience? Oh, there, it looks like we lost the connection with Professor Balaji Akinyemi. Well, that's the... Prof, quickly, I was asking a question there, and my question is, with your knowledge, and knowledge, long years of understanding of how global politics could impact on national development, what lesson would you say this government should learn, or what thing do you think this government could do to help them in a more reasonable way approach global politics for national development?
Well, my answer will be quite obvious. Number one, I believe that credible appointments should be made into the vacant ambassadorial posts that right now have been left vacant. Honestly, we need to fill them. Now, I know, because I've been involved in this debate, that in the age of the internet, do we really need ambassadors at post? And the answer is yes. It's not that the absence of ambassadors deny us the information that we will need, that we can get through the internet, but diplomacy runs on ambassadorial contacts, the interaction between governments and ambassadors at post. We need to have these ambassadors back at post as soon as possible. That's number one. Number two, I would like to see more interaction between, you see, I believe that, and I'm one of those who was involved in the creation of the National Security Advisor's Office. What it is doing now was not what we had in mind. because we believe that Nigeria needs at that high level.
This was meant to be. Like you have the National Security Advisor post in the United States.
Prof.
Yes.
We're totally out of time, Prof, but many thanks so much indeed for your time, Prof. Former External Affairs Minister and Professor of Political Science, thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's our show for today, man. Thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimberly. Bless Nigeria.